Hi, this is Simon Obstill and welcome back to part 7 of this tutorial, in which we're using Blender and Motion to create this spaceship scene. So, by popular request, what I will be doing in this 7th part is to look in detail at the animation of the scene, including the ship and the camera and the lighting as well. So, the way I left it last time, things were looking pretty much like this. So I think the first thing I want to do is to set up the camera. And the first thing I want to do is to change the angle of view to 80, so we've got a wider angle on the lens. Then I'm going to come over to Properties, and I'm going to set the Z position to 650 and the X position to negative 410. And I'm just going to reset that Y rotation to 0 for the time being. Then I'm going to come back to my ship group, and I want to come to frame 190 on the timeline. And what I'm going to do here is have an X position of negative 650, a Y position of 0, a Z position of 0. And I'm going to keyframe all of that rotation and position. And what I'm going to do is set the overall scale of this group to 225. So then I want my ship to fly down into frame out of the sky, and to do this I'm going to use an overshoot behavior, and I'm going to apply it to the Y position. So right click on the right Y position, add parameter behavior overshoot, and let's have a start value of 1000, and let's have an end value of negative 200, and let's have a ramp duration of 50. And I want to set the end offset to 215. So now the ship is going to come down like so, and it's going to bounce like that. So that's what the overshoot is doing. Now you'll probably have noticed that the shadow is much too small now, so we need to adjust that. So let's come back down to the circle, which is providing our shadow. Let's set its radius to 900. And that's going to look a little bit better, I think. So ship comes down, the shadow appears. So we're getting there. So let's do a little bit more animation with our ship. Come back to that ship group. I'm going to come to the first frame here. And that Y rotation, we've already set a keyframe there. I'm going to set that to negative 45. And then I'm going to come to frame 115 on the timeline, and I'm going to set that rotation to 0. So as the ship comes down, it sort of rotates around like that. And then I want to skip forward to frame 190, and I'm going to set that Y rotation to 90 degrees. So that means our ship is now going to be heading off towards the city in terms of its rotation. So then I want us to come to the last frame. So this is where we'll have sent the ship flying off into the distance. So we won't be able to see the result of this until we adjust our camera, but I'm going to give you these numbers. So 10,000 for X, and for Y, let's go for 2775, and for Z, let's go for 2720. As I say, we won't be able to see that, but you can see the ship flying off. And once we follow it with the camera, we'll be able to see where it's going. So let's come back to the camera and do a little bit more work on this. Let's come to the first frame. Let's keyframe all the rotation values. And I'm going to set the X rotation to 16. So we're looking up as the ship comes down. Then let's come forward to frame 100. And I want us to be coming down with the camera here. So let's set the X rotation to negative 16. So now we're actually looking down like so. So ship comes down, we pan down with it, and ship rotates. So then I want to come to frame 190, And let's again set a keyframe for all of the rotation like so. And then let's come forward to the last frame and let's again adjust the rotation. So 12 degrees on X and negative 90 on Y. And you can see we're now following the ship more or less as it flies off into the distance. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to finesse these keyframes so that the camera moves a little bit quicker, or rather the ship doesn't move quite so quickly and the camera can keep up. So I'm going to come to, where are we, 220, something like that. So with the ship selected, let's open up the keyframe editor. So window keyframe editor, and that will bring up the keyframes for the ship. It's important to switch to animated so we'll be able to see those keyframes, all the animated keyframes for the ship. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I just want to isolate the X. So if I hold down the Alt or Option key and click there, you can see I've isolated the X value, and then I can drag around that first keyframe, and then if I manipulate this Bezier handle, I can keep the ship more or less in frame like that. I'm going to adjust the other end as well, because then the movement will speed up like that. So we need to adjust the Y as well. So let's disable the X and Alt or Option click on the Y, and then let's do the same thing. We don't want it to take off quite so quickly. If we click on here, we can sort of more or less isolate that. It's a real pain because it doesn't really scale as it should do. But anyway, again, what we're going to do is drag around that first keyframe. We want to make sure it doesn't sort of rise out of frame too quickly. So we're going to drag this Bezier handle like that. And again, we might just do that so it doesn't, so it's a more of a sort of a smooth progress. And then we need to disable the Y and Alt or Option click on the Z and do the same thing because that's why it's out of frame as well. So again, just massage that keyframe just to keep our ship where we want it. And again, we're looking for this sort of slope. And now that's not too bad. I don't mind that it gets a little bit edgy. That's kind of quite dramatic. But if we do mind, we could probably come to the camera. And if we click on this, we can frame up all the camera rotation values. So what is the problem here? The problem is the camera is not actually rotating fast enough on Y. So let's isolate the Y, and then we can select this last keyframe here. All the way down here, I'm going to select interpolation Bezier just so I can drag that like that. And then this is going to look like this, and we stay pretty much framed up on the ship. So that's pretty good work, I think. We could get a lot more fancy with it, but I think it's looking more or less how I want it to look. Okay, so let's close up the keyframe editor. That's Command 8, or you could do the whole nonsense of coming over here and trying to remember which one of these it is. Okay, it's all the way down there. Okay, so I think we've done enough on the animation front for now. Now let's do a little bit of color correction on our background group here. So first of all, I'm going to select that desert environment. I'm going to add color levels, and I'm also going to add color hue saturation. So the levels, I'm just going to bring the black in just a little bit like that, and just the gamma down like that, something like that I think is going to be good. And then I want to adjust the saturation because a nighttime scene, there's a lot less color in a nighttime scene. So I'm going to go for negative 0.5 on the saturation there. And then I'm going to also do a little bit of work on the desert floor here. We've already added a hue saturation. In actual fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce that saturation down to 0.65. And then I'm actually going to increase the value there to 0.7. And I'm going to compensate a little bit with a color levels. It's going to look wrong until we add the lights, so you need to trust me on this. I'm going to just bring in the black a bit like that, crush that down, gamma just a little bit in like so. So I think we're pretty good for the color correction of this background group. I just want to make a bit of an adjustment to the desert environment object. And I'm going to go for -1000 for its Z position. And I'm also going to adjust that rotation, the Y rotation, so we've got 130. And that's because I want the ship to be flying towards the city, and now that's lined up a bit more like I want it to be. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add some lights and come to the top here, and the first thing I'm going to do is add a light like that. It's going to be a point light. I'm going to set its intensity to 5000, and then let's come over and adjust its position. So we're going to have 17,000 for X, we're going to have 5795 for Y, and 5145 for Z. And I hope this is going to turn out right. So what we got? Yes. So we've got this sun-like affair over in the distance there. So I don't think I've got these numbers quite right. I think I'm going to try 18,000 instead of 17,000 for X. And yes, I think that's a little bit better. Let's try 18,500. I want it to be really bright on the background like that. I think that's going to be good enough. So 18,500 for X rather than the number I originally gave you. And let's just give this light just a little bit of a bluish cast like so. Next, I want to duplicate this light. So right click, duplicate. I'm going to crank this intensity up to 9000. I want to increase its fall off to 4. And this one is going to be over on the left-hand side at the beginning. So over here, top left-hand corner. So properties, let's have these values. So -15605 for X. For Y, we're going to have 9650. And for Z, we're going to have -13500. So now it's sitting up there in the top left-hand corner, and we've got this kind of effect. So I've renamed those 2 point lights as point light right, which is this one over here above the city, and point light left, which is the one over here at the beginning. And now what I'm going to do is add some directional lights. So I'm going to add a light, and I'm going to switch it to directional. So the point of these directional lights is going to be to do some filling in of the different areas around the ship. And the nature of directional lights is that their position is completely irrelevant. So let's just set up the rotation instead, which is the only relevant factor. So this one is going to be -130 on X and 230 on Y. And now the other thing about directional lights is that they're pretty strong and we really need to dial them back quite a lot. So I'm going to set this one to about 5%. And then I'm going to just give it a little bit of blue. So then I'm going to duplicate it. So right click, duplicate. I'm going to come over and set its rotation to be -10 on X and 145 on Y. You can see they're kind of clustered in the middle there. It literally just doesn't matter what their position is. I can't stress that enough. It's just the direction is the only thing that matters. And here I'm going to come down and reduce the intensity even more to 1%. It's just a little bit of a fill. And then I'm going to duplicate it one more time. This one I'm going to be a little bit more intense. I'm going to go for 40%, but I'm going to bring the color way down to somewhere like this. So sort of the brightness of the color, I should say. So if you want to see the HSB, these are the values we've got. Okay, and then I'm just going to again set up its positions. So here we will zero out that X value, and for the Y we will have 52. And together these three lights are just, if I just toggle them on and off, they're just giving us some fill for the ship. Bearing in mind that we've really reduced the level of the environment quite a lot. So now we've got something that looks like this, and There's not a lot else to do. Obviously, I'm not going to show you the smoke because that's a photographic element that is not copyright free and I can't share it with you. And really the only extra thing I want to show you is the arch. So let's import that asset, come to the assets folder, bring in the arch like that, and let's put it into a group of its own. I'm going to put it at the top here for the time being. So let's come to the end where we want to be able to position it, and let's reset its position. So I'm going to go for an X position of 22,000, a Y position of 6,870, and a Z position of 5,245. And then I'm going to scale it up to 1,514. And then I'm going to rotate it through -90 on Y. So that's more or less where I want it to be sitting. So then, the ship comes round and it doesn't fly through the arch. And now, as I've pointed out in previous tutorials, the nature of 3D objects is that they don't quite interact as you expect with the motion objects. So what I actually need to do is I need to put the ship above the arch, and now you'll see that the ship does in fact fly through the arch rather than the other way around. So let's just do a bit of color correction on the arch. First of all, I'm going to come to color levels. I'm also going to add a color contrast. I also want to add keying matte magic. And then finally, I'm going to add stylize extrude. Now let's just turn off the extrude for the time being because it's a bit confusing. So with the levels, I'm just going to bring down the white level like that, just to darken the whole thing down. And then with the contrast, I'm going to set the contrast to 0.4, but I'm going to adjust the pivot and I'm going to go for something like 0.22 on that. And then I'm going to use the matte magic to just shrink it a little bit, so 0.1. And then let's set up the extrude. I'm going to turn it back on again. Let's go for an angle of 360 and a distance of 20. And there's just one final thing that I did, and that was to add a light just to the ship itself. And so let's do that. So come to add object light, make sure we put that into the ship group itself. And let's come over and adjust its position. So we're going to have 50 on Y and 295 on Z. And the result of that is we've got that little light there on the front of the ship. And that just kind of, if I turn those overlays off, it just helps give us a feel that we've got some light on the front of the ship. Now, there is just one little detail I want to mention here, and that is because lights shine right the way through the geometry, it's probably best to just fade this light off from around frame 200. So if we come to 200, let's keyframe the intensity and let's step forward to say, 220 and set it to 0. And it just avoids some rather odd sort of effects that we would otherwise have. And while I was showing you that, I saw something else I didn't like the look of. There's a little bit of a hot spot there, and it's coming from this light here. So that's the middle directional light. And I think we can just fix that by just changing that X rotation from -10 to -8. And that, I think, has taken care of that. We're getting a little bit of specular shine, which is good, but it's not giving us that nasty little hotspot. So lighting is a fiddle and complicated, and you need to keep an eye on everything. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. Sorry, it's been a long, tiresome list of numbers, but that's the only way of doing it. And at least we can say that we have completed the journey. So thanks for sticking with it all this way.